person I would hope would be here, and that is Councilor William Parker, who represents the district we're talking about in this film. And we reached out aggressively trying to engage him in this conversation. So, but Rachel is going to tell you who is here, because we have a fantastic panel, and we're going to talk, I hope, about solutions tonight. Thank you very much. And there'll be microphones in the audience ultimately for questions that you may have as well. Thank you. Rachel?
Well, I'd just like to, wow, good microphone. Just to introduce the panel, first starting on, well, my right, your left, stage left, Sonya DiCarlo. She's anchored and reported in radio and television for 20 years in New Orleans, Charleston, and Birmingham. She was the assistant news director at NBC 13 in Birmingham, and most recently was the special projects producer for CBS 24 in Birmingham. She produced several special reports covering topics ranging from education, weather, crime, health, and the environment. And she was the executive producer for 2 one-hour commercial-free Deadly Deception documentaries, talked about in the documentary just now. And those uncovered details of toxic contamination in North Birmingham communities. Currently, Ms. DiCarlo is the Director of Communications for the Alabama Opportunity Scholarship Fund. That's a scholarship granting organization providing K-12 scholarships for children in failing schools in Alabama. And then we have Edward Bowser. He's a community engagement specialist with the Alabama Media Group, that's right here in Birmingham. A native of Virginia, Edward started his newspaper career at the Courier Journal in Louisville, Kentucky, where he eventually served as assistant copy desk chief. After moving to Birmingham in 2009, Edward joined advertising agency Lucky & Company, where he immersed himself in all things digital. Now he's returned to his first love, journalism, at the Alabama Media Group. At the Alabama Media Group, his passion for journalism, social media, and community engagement and service is where he's the community engagement specialist, and he keeps AL.com's digital voice strong and vibrant, managing their social media accounts. And then we have Corey Masuca, PhD, Principal Air Pollution Control Engineer for the Jefferson County Department of Health. He's been with the agency for more than 15 years. Mr. Masuca oversees the Jefferson County Department of Health's industrial source permitting, inspection and compliance program, and the ambient air monitoring program. He's earned a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Auburn University and a PhD in environmental health from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And then we have George Munchus, PhD, professor of management in the Department of Management, Information Systems, and Quantitative Methods at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. He earned a BBA degree in Business Administration from the University of North Texas, also an MBA degree in Management, a PhD in Management, all from UNT as well. And his research is concerned with human resource utilization, project management, employee-employer relations, and inequality management theory. He's published numerous articles and presented numerous seminars on the above-mentioned topics, and he has served as a consultant to individuals, industry, government, labor, and education organizations in the area of human resources, organizational development, business development, economic development, and research advocacy work. So that is our panel here for tonight. And yeah. And I think I'm actually going to join you at that seat there, since it's not taken. It'd be a little tough for me to stand this whole time. So, but while I go sit over there, and just before I ask the first question, it was a very powerful documentary. We heard a lot of people expressing frustration, sadness, anger at the situation. Could we go down the panel and just have a few sentences from each of you describing your immediate reactions after seeing it? Sonia, do you want to start?
Sure. It was wonderful. You did a great job. It's very good. You covered a lot of territory. There's a lot to be said. There's a lot to the story, as you discovered early on, Hunter. And there's so many elements to the story because, as it was talked about, there's air, there's water, there's soil. You have regulatory agencies, you have residents who don't quite know what to do about it and don't know how to fix it, and they feel powerless. And I think he really captured that. I think probably the most frustrating thing that was demonstrated, I think, in this documentary, as well as Deadly Deception 1 and Deadly Deception 2, was that things seem to move at a snail's pace when it comes to getting results. And you know, some of it can be helped, some of it probably could be helped, but it is very frustrating when you're on the receiving end of toxic pollution and you see the people around you dying. It doesn't make any sense. So I thought it was very good. You did a great job, Hunter.
I also wanted to echo those sentiments to Hunter. That was absolutely amazing. The most heartbreaking part of that film was it put a face on this issue that we've been wrangling with for years, and we kind of stuck with the bureaucracy and the politics and the money. But this showed the faces that are really affected by it, the young people that are affected by it, the lives that were lost that were affected by this issue. And I love that this film actually put it tangibly, the faces that were pained by this. I think that told the story more well as anything else.
My name is Masuca. I echo the sentiments of the two previous panelists who've spoken. It's a great film. Gas definitely has a very important role in ensuring equality with respect to environmental pollution. We at the local health agency do our part. We realize that there's still a lot of things and a long way we can go, need to go to really solve the problem, but we are committed. Health officer, Dr. Mark Wilson, unfortunately couldn't be here this evening, but again, he would adamantly agree that we, while we have made significant strides, there are, still is a lot of work to be done, and we are here as a stakeholder to support any efforts to clean the air in Jefferson County and in Birmingham.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to try to be brief, because it's hard for professors to be brief. Some of us are like Baptist preachers, but I'm sure I'm going to offend somebody before the night is over. So, to all you preachers out there, okay. But the reason I was so willing to do this was very simple. I grew up in a community like this in Fort Worth, Texas, a community called Stop 6. Of course, if you go look and Google it, it will give you some history of why it was called Stop 6. But I just want to echo what I've heard so far, and I want to thank Stacy Probst for doing this. And we got an email today where she invited industry. I'm about the closest representative you're going to get. And I can assure you the industry does not like me either. But I will tell you this. I'm a member of the Birmingham Business Alliance, the dues paying member. I'm here to speak for me. I'm not here to speak for UAB. Let's get that straight. Because I'm sure there are some UAB folks in the audience that are going to have something to say. But just make sure you spell my name right. Because I'm going to say it, and I'm going to continue to say it. Now, what I'm most disappointed about is the industry won't get involved in this process. I'll tell you a little secret. Well, it's not really a secret. Does anybody out there read the Wall Street Journal? Okay, good. Does anybody know that Walter Energy headquarters is in Birmingham? Has anybody been to their stockholders meeting? Does anybody own any stock in Walter Energy? You do? Who said they did? Oh, they don't want to.
I don't.
They don't want to identify themselves. Okay. Well, let me tell you something. You can buy one share of Walter Coke stock or Walter Energy stock, and you can go to the stockholders meeting and raise all the hell you want to. And I'll tell you why. And you're probably going to get put in jail. You're probably going to get put out. In another life of mine, I did this very same thing with Allegasco. You can buy a share of stock in Allegasco also. Keep in mind, Allegasco just got bought out by a major multi-billion-dollar corporation in St. Louis. Does anybody own any stock in Allegasco? Or as some call it, the Southern Energy Natural Gas Company. Am I the only one up here
Can I just give you a few?
who buys stock in these companies? All right, that's it.
Okay.
I'm good.
He will be available afterwards to talk to you about stockholder, stock meeting
No, I
intervention
won't.
strategies, if you'd like.
You can send me an email. I will not be available after the meeting to talk to you about any of these publicly held companies, because I know there are lawyers out there, I see them. Okay? So that's the end of my comments. Thank you.
You'll have plenty more opportunity for comments for the rest of the evening. But I wanted to get to the first question. Who's responsible for the cleanup and ongoing pollution prevention in this problem? And if we know who is responsible and determine that blame, like what are the next steps with that?
Well, again, I'm with the health department. We're charged with the jurisdiction of regulating only air pollution. We do not regulate soil pollution, land pollution, water pollution, stormwater pollution. We have a stormwater component, but not from an industrial facility perspective. So the main thing we do, the main group I'm with is the regulatory unit at the health department, and we're charged with regulating industrial sources such as the coke plants with respect to the Clean Air Act amendments, making sure they comply with the rules and regulations. Our staff completes inspections at the facility to ensure compliance. They also review records and reports to assure compliance. In addition to that, we also are charged with the responsibility of ensuring that the air quality for the geographical region, in this case Jefferson County, meets the federal clean air standards. We have several monitors located dispersed throughout the county, and we consistently make sure that our monitor values don't exceed the federal health standards, and if they're due, then we work with the state agency to come up with a plan, a SIP, state implementation plan, to come up with strategies to reduce pollutants specifically from the monitors that have exceeded the standards. So we will continue, as we have been, continue to enforce the rules and regulations. There have been an onslaught of regulations that have occurred within the past 10 years, past 20 years, that affect the coke plants, and we've seen reductions in emissions. However, that does not mean there will not be any emissions. However, as coke plants, some of the other industries are allowed to operate. However, they have to operate within the parameters of the permit and applicable regulations. And that's what our main job is from the air perspective at the health department.
Sonia?
So if the question is,
Who's responsible
cleaning?
for
Right, who's
cleaning
cleaning,
up?
who's responsible? The people who are cleaning, what you see are the EPA. So the EPA came in and they are doing the soil remediation. They are the ones that are testing further with the water issues, and they are working with the county health department to deal with the air issues. But when you see the tractors and when you see the backhoes out in the houses, it's the EPA. Now the EPA is looking for PRPs, potentially responsible parties, to pay for the cleanup. And as the documentary showed, the PRPs that have been named so far are Alabama Gas, KMAC, Drummond Company, which is the ABC company, Walter Koch, and U.S. Pipe and Foundry. So those are the 5 companies that have been named as PRPs. And according to this information from the EPA, as far as April, all 5 parties have declined to negotiate the cleanup of the properties that they have begun. So they have obviously entered into discussion with the EPA. I don't know how far the discussion has gone, but they have declined to participate. So basically, it's the taxpayer dollars. It's the EPA who is doing the cleanup so far, and that comes from taxpayer money.
And as far as ongoing pollution prevention, that's something that's in your wheelhouse and a state issue in addition to the EPA?
Yes, as far as, again, with respect to air pollution, pollution prevention measures are things that, actually there's a program by EPA called P2 Pollution Prevention that encourages, it's really a volunteer program, P2 Pollution Prevention, to encourage facilities to minimize their impacts of emissions. That includes adding additional controls, that includes changing materials that are raw materials that are responsible for direct emissions. So we work closely with companies, always encouraging and seeking ways to reduce pollutant emissions, but at first and foremost, we assure compliance with the regulatory standards that apply to the facilities. That's our primary job and goal. Again, so that pollution amounts, concentration amounts will be reduced or minimized.
So moving on, a lot of people who watch this documentary, of course you can't watch it without feeling for the people in it and being moved by their struggles of the losses of their loved ones. But some people might just ask, well, it seems like it's a really bad place to live, so why don't those people just move?
Rachel, I recently wrote about this very issue, and I got so many emails asking that very question. And I will say it was the greatest pet peeve of mine to hear that response, because as we saw in the video, we have people in those areas where property values are just dropping. They can't sell, they can't go anywhere. We have generations of people there who can't go anywhere because that's the only life they know. And I think it's really the height of arrogance and just promise to say, well, you should get out and leave those situations. We've tied their hands, and it's not fair to make someone leave when they aren't able to.
And Sonya, I'm curious what you heard. We heard some stories from families in this documentary, but from the people that you spoke with when you were working on your series for television a few years ago.
We, all total, I have to say, it was about 3.5 years worth of investigating. We interviewed over 100 people, most of them residents. I got to know a lot of the residents very well. Like I said in the documentary, the thing that struck me the most was that they didn't even realize that their neighbors and their neighbors' neighbors and the people all around them were struggling with the same issues, the same asthma problems, COPD, cancers. They didn't even realize that this was all being connected. And they completely felt helpless. They felt, there was one man who we spoke with he lives right across the street from Walter Coke, and his ceiling had caved in twice because of black soot that had collected in his attic, and he physically and personally duct taped it back up and put it back up, and we went in and we videotaped it, and he had cardboard in his windows to keep the black soot from coming inside of his windows into his house. And so I said, why are you taking care of this on your own? I said, you live across the street. I can look out your window, and there's over the fence, you can see the Walter Coke, you can see the piles, and you can see the dust, the black dust coming off of them. Why are you taking care of this yourself? And why aren't you asking for help? Or why aren't you knocking on Walter Coke's door and saying, come clean up this mess? Because it's obvious that you did this. And it was a silly question, because he said, I can't do that. I can't fight big business. Who am I? I don't know how to do that. And I realized it was a very rhetorical question, but in my mind, I don't live in those communities. In my mind, the community that I live in, if this was happening in my house or my neighbor's house, we would have been camped out on their front door saying, you're kidding, right? You're not going to take care of this? Well, you're not going to test this? You're not going to come fix this? And so I had a hard time understanding why the residents weren't doing something, but they were feeling it became obvious after a few weeks and months, they were just hopeless. They felt like there was nothing they could do, and they would talk to me and say, sure, come on in, we'll talk to you, but it's not going to do anything. There's been people before you, and there'll be people after you, and nothing's going to get done. So.
And George, this is also something that you talk about in the documentary, how it's a long-standing issue in these communities, and there can be this frustration.
You sure you want to hear from me?
Yes, I do. I do.
All right. Because
Yes.
anytime you don't want to hear from me, just say the word and I'll shut up. I can do that. I tell my students all the time, you don't want to hear what I got to say? Leave the classroom.
Well,
And some get up and leave. But
tell us a little bit more about why people do feel stuck or are stuck in these communities and can't get away from these problems.
Has anybody ever heard of Occupy Wall Street? You ever heard of the National Action Network? All right. What did Occupy Wall Street do? All right, I'll just wait for y'all to come ask the question. But Sonya gets to a good point. The people who feel helpless, like I said earlier, anybody can buy one share of stock in Walter Energy. You can go to their stockholders meeting and you can shut it down. Now, they're not going to want you to come in there. but you got a right to go in there. Whether you own $1 million worth of shares, I think last time I looked at it, Walter Coke was trading at around $30. Anybody got $30? All right, buy the share, go to the stockholders meeting. I'm just appalled that there's not more activism directed at these publicly held corporations. Now, the privately held companies are hard to get to, but the lawyers out here know how to get to them. So it's going to take what some of us call direct action, and I see Sheila Tyson sitting on the front row. If you don't know what direct action is, see Sheila Tyson. So based on what Sonya said, the only solution I think is to buy shares in these publicly held companies, go to their stockholders meeting and tell them what you want. They're not stupid. They got the cash, they can pay for it. And I'm disappointed that nobody from Walter Energy is here tonight. I mean, I know they were invited according to Stacy. And I'm also disappointed that I'm the only person here from the BBA, and I'm not really a real BBA person. They tried to send my dues back to me, you know, because I went to a couple of their meetings and said things that they didn't want to hear. Well, you know, and I'm really disappointed that Dr. Watts isn't involved in this. I know he's got the care. I mean, he's the president of UAB. He's a medical doctor. I'm just assuming he was out of town. Okay? Now, don't tell him I said that either, because I'm sure the Birmingham News will say it. But that's all I have to say right now, is that if you want to make some real change, get active with these corporate entities that own the capital and the means of production. This is not difficult kind of stuff. All this stuff is publicly available. The private companies, I have to think about that. I don't know how you get into that. I really don't. Thank you.
So everyone in Birmingham, living in this Birmingham metro area, is impacted by the pollution generated by these plants that we saw in the documentary. And why do you think there is more outrage coming from communities in other parts of Birmingham? Granted, it's more concentrated in the areas by the plants, but we all do breathe this air.
It's part of a larger problem that Birmingham has. We tend to live in our silos, where if we're on this side of town, we're concerned with these issues. If I'm over here, I'm concerned with these. I don't care about your schools or your pollution, because I'm okay. And the problem is we segregate ourselves, and we are only concerned with what's going on with ourselves. Until we begin to reverberate our voices, and I think we were talking earlier about this community, and we wonder why there hasn't been a louder outcry. This is a community that's downtrodden. They feel like they can't do anything. We're going to live with this. So it's up to outside communities to help raise their voice. And that's where I hope everyone here today can take that charge and continue to lift that up. Because unfortunately, there's a big population out there that is like, it's not my neighborhood, it's not my problem. Like wind doesn't exist, then we won't be breathing it all anyway.
Well, I was just going to say that something I think a lot of communities don't realize is all of us, no matter where we live, can take part in permit application processes. We can take part and want to educate ourselves in knowing what exactly that large company that's 5 blocks away from us, for instance, over in West Birmingham, near the Wylam community, which was brought up. The residents who live around there need to be involved with the permitting process of the plant that's out there. So I think there needs to be a broad education of the public to let them know you need to ask questions. You need to be involved in the permitting process. You need to be educated. You need to get involved, because it means something and it makes a difference, and it could mean you would be amazed at the things you could find out and the things that you can help to affect change.
I might be naive, but I still think the louder our voices echo, that change will happen. That's just me.
I'd like to add in response to Sonya's message that, again, we try to encourage and we've tried to increase public participation in the air permitting process. We've heard the citizens loud and clear about historically there not being enough input allowed by the citizens, especially in affected areas, near facilities, their ability to have a say-so or input into the permitting program. So we, as a result, held several permitting workshops that emphasize and teach the process of issuing permits, the citizens' rights to public comments, EPA's role in the issuance of permits. We've also held workshops that explain how the coke facilities operate, what rules and regulations they're subject to. We've also, within the past couple of years, have started placing the permits online on our website. Also, when they're in draft mode, we place the permits in publicly accessible places, whereas in the past, 10 years ago, that wasn't unheard of. We just quietly issued a permit, we put a public notice in the classified sections, in the legal section of the newspaper, and citizens that, who did not know when we were going to post that, had no idea when the public comment period would end or begin. So we've taken heed of the comments we received from the citizens, especially in the past couple of years, and attempted to be more transparent and allow greater input in the issuance of permits for industrial sources in respect to air pollution.
So hopefully that'll provide the public with more awareness. They'll be able to speak out on more of these issues. But a barrier in the conversation, there's obviously some unwillingness to talk about this. As we saw, the filmmakers were declined interviews with all of the companies that were mentioned in the documentary. And we unfortunately today don't have a representative from the EPA here. So it's something that obviously on a certain level people don't want to talk about. And given that unwillingness, how can the industry really truly be engaged to talk about solutions if they're not going to show up?
You got to be at the table. Again, it's not rocket science, and I'm probably sound like a broken record, but the ownership is the key structure. Just because you got one share, they're not going to like what you got to say. I saw a CEO at Allegansco put an old lady out of a meeting. That's how serious she was. But she popped him with her cane before they put her out. So to say industry is unwilling to engage, there are reasons that they're not here. At least let's put it like this. None of their CEOs are here. But I see some of their lawyers out there in the audience. Now, why do you think they're here? It's not because of me. It's because of some of you out there. So I think Sonya said it, Ed said it, this brother here said it. Everybody would buy one share. Guess what happened if all of you were to show up at a Walter Energy stockholder meeting? What can happen? You get some results. I'm not telling you a dream I had. I'm telling you what I know. Because I've been in these stockholder meetings where I've seen people turn things around, particularly at the local level. This is a wonderful opportunity. The corporate office was in Tampa, Florida. They got run out of Tampa. Now they're in Birmingham. I think they got an office out at the Galleria. Yeah. And to the lawyers out there, hello. I wish they'd come up here. But you know, they're doing what they're hired to do. So I think it's simple. Send them a copy of the, send it to their president, their CEO. Their names are listed, the amount of sheriff. They're here. So Stacey, when you say industry's not engaged, do you want me to call some of them out?
And we will have a public comment period starting.
Okay, public comment.
So we'll have some opportunity for people from the audience to ask questions as well in about 10 minutes.
And let the lawyers ask some questions.
I am going to help a little bit. Sure. So, and by the way, I want to see, we have the mics ready to go?
Okay, we're going to bring mics out to the audience on both sides here, and we want to give you an opportunity to ask some questions. I want to reiterate, I do think it is very important what Dr. Munchus said to say. We invited the BBA, the head of the BBA, and anyone that they wanted to appoint to come be part of this conversation. And we have pushed very hard to engage with the industries that are involved. And I think you can imagine that actually the approach that they're taking works the best. I mean, it's working for them. Not engaging in the conversation is working. They're going to have to be made uncomfortable enough to not let it be the best option for them. And that's actually what Dr. Munchus is talking about, which is, you know, buy a share of stock or show up at places where they don't want you to be, you know. And that's a difficult thing to do, but I do think it's one way to start to change the conversation. Do we have mics in the audience?
Oh, no. You want to do any questions?
Do you have them?
We can go.
Okay. I do want to say one more thing about the economic issue and the industry issue is that Birmingham has been held back for many, many years, 30 years, actually, being out of attainment. Does anybody know what attainment is? Attainment is abiding by the Clean Air Act, essentially. That's essentially what it is, okay? And if your pollution level is above what the Clean Air Act dictates, then you actually have a problem bringing in additional industry or bringing in businesses that might pollute because they can't necessarily get a license for doing that. So we've just come out of attainment and we're about to head back into it because the rules and the regulations are tightening up some more, as they should be, scientifically. So I just want to make that point. It's not just bad for health, it's very bad for health, but it's horrible for our economics. And Birmingham has recovered more slowly than many, I don't know if you saw that news, than many of the other southeastern cities. And that's a huge issue. So let's go to the mics. Does anyone have a question out there? Down here? Oh, we got bunches. Oh my goodness, okay. Start back here.
Hi, I'm new to Birmingham, but I'm a mother, an educator, and a scientist. So I've been doing lots of research and have noticed that you have a very large special needs population. And I've been wondering why, and I think I found my answer. So I think it's time to expand the conversation and make it about other things. And I think once you bring that in, you'll have some dialogue.
Thank you. I'm John Meehan, and when I was looking at the film, it's horrifying. What irks me is I was listening, I saw it on Facebook. Twinkle Kavanaugh, the president of the Public Service Commission, goes around and says, well, we're going to blame the environmentalists. They're trying to steal our jobs, our coal jobs, because of coal. How do we control people like her who go out here and say, well, these environmentalists are trying to take our jobs away and everything else because of coal and everything else. That's your problem. When you got a Public Service Commission who's more concerned about pro-industry than they are people, then something is wrong in our society when we got these folks here that we elect. You know, it's our political leaders don't respond to us. I'm glad to see Councilwoman Tyson here. You know, that's somebody that cares. How do we control these political leaders who don't care nothing about this type of thing? They need to see this thing, not, you know, instead of us trying to preach to a choir. Thanks.
Did you want to ask that question to the panel? Okay, so in reference to his comments, what do you say to political leaders or industry leaders who try to turn the conversation away from the environmental aspects of it? Maybe make it more about job creation and the economy.
Well, one thing I would say to John, take a copy of this and give it to Twinkles. Force her to sit down and look at it. I mean, I'm not saying do anything criminal, you know, unless you feel like you can get away with it.
He's not saying you should do anything criminal.
However, you know, sometimes in the name of justice, you got to do some things that might break a civil law, and you got to be prepared to, you know, and that might mean laying down in the street, or that might mean going to jail, or whatever you got to do. But I don't think that the political leadership in the state is stupid. Well, okay. I won't comment any further. But you gotta engage and use the tool. I mean, this is, you know, when Hunter came by the office and said he was gonna interview me, normally I don't grant interviews. Because after I grant an interview, then it comes another and another and another. You know, and I still got my students, you know, they want me there too, but I don't mind this because this is something I feel passionate about. But I think you got to get the message out. And I don't know her, but I do think the Public Service Commission probably needs some help. Probably all the Republicans need to be defeated.
Sonya,
So I'm not a Republican, so I can say that.
I think Sonya wanted to jump in on
No,
that.
I would just say, you know, to what he's saying, to add to it, politicians listen to voters. And voters are all of us. It's the general population. The general population gets their news from TV, from radio. There are no TV cameras in this room right now, which I think is sad. I don't know if they came here earlier, if they left, if they just did a little video on it, but I think that you're not going to get politicians like Twinkle, or you're not going to get other politicians to stand up and fight for something if they don't feel like their voters want them to fight for it, if you understand what I'm saying. If they don't perceive a problem because their voters aren't telling them there's a problem, why fight for it? Why am I going to fight against industry and against jobs if there's none of my constituents want me to?
I will give a shout out to ABC 3340 who was here, and they did shoot part of the film and do a long interview, so they were here.
Another question from the audience? It's one up there? Okay.
My name is Vivian Starks, and I live in Collegeville. I live approximately 1 block from Walter Coke. And Mr. Masuca, Walter Coke have come up now for an air permit. Have you heard our cries? Have you listened to what we've been trying to tell you? Have the health department been good caretakers of us? No. We have begged, we have pleaded. Walter Coke get out there, they make their own assessment of what's coming out of that community, and the health department constantly tell us it's okay. Nothing is wrong. Nothing is wrong. The children in our community, we have the highest problem of asthmatic children in the state. We were #1 in Washington, D.C. for pollution. If it had not been for Obama, we wouldn't have EPA here. It's pathetic when pollution cannot be controlled by the people that we have given to their hands to take care of us. We live in a community where we can't even drink the water safely. We can't even come outside. Our children can't even play. I can't even plant flowers. It used to be a time when we could plant fruit trees. We can't do any of that now. All I'm saying is that Walter Coke's permit is up. It's time for you guys at the health department to give us some type of respect, give us some help, and give us good protection from Walter Coke. We're not trying to move a plan. We just want them to be a good neighbor. Thank you.
Can you respond for it?
I hear comments about Mr. Starks, and again, we have worked with the community a lot more as of late. As far as the permit issuance comes into play, that has to be approved ultimately by EPA. Right now, again, we make sure they're in compliance with standards. That doesn't mean there won't be any, unfortunately, doesn't mean realistically there won't be any pollution, but we make sure they comply with the limitations of their permit. We also routinely encourage citizens, please, if you see instances of excessive emissions emanating from the facility crossing the property lines, call us, let us know. We rarely get calls from excessive emissions crossing property lines when they have upsets, malfunctions, shutdowns, breakdowns. So we can kind of get the grasp of where the pollutants are emanating from and dialogue with the facility to come up with control strategies. But we hear you loud and clear, Mr. Stark, and other interested citizens in North Birmingham. We want to continue to work with you all to make sure that your air quality is not compromised. However, we also are somewhat limited in respects, and that we are an extension of EPA. We pretty much regulate the rules and the statutes and laws they implement. We're the enforcement arm of the EPA, so they pretty much set the rules and regulations. We enforce those rules and regulations on a local level. Again, we hear you loud and clear, Ms. Starks and other citizens. We're doing the best we can as a local agency, but we also rely heavily and work heavily with EPA on any non-compliance issues, and overall work with EPA and other interested parties to reduce air pollutant emissions and concentrations in the area. So yes, sentiments were heard, and we will continue to work to reduce pollutant emission levels. I know that is one of the key tenets of our health officer is to be more community driven and more community have a chance or a input into the community to hear their concerns, and importantly work with facilities to continue to result in emissions and concentrations reductions.
I have a follow-up to that. So you enforce the limits set by the EPA, and you're an extension of that, and the enforcement arm of that, and what they decide are the pollution limits. Is there any flexibility as far as what the agencies can do on a local level? Maybe
Yes.
if the EPA has one limit, can you decide to lower it?
Yes, and in accordance with what Ms. Probst said earlier, areas that are in non-attainment, such as we had been for the previous 30 years, are allowed to implement strategies and technologies and techniques to reduce pollutant emission levels that aren't really required in the regulation. So yes, we can go above and beyond what's required in the regulations, specifically when it comes to overall air quality in the area. With Jefferson County, we have implemented, for example, with respect to controlling volatile organic compounds. That's not something you'll see in ADAM's regs. That's something you'll see in our regs, where you have a certain VOC content per gallon for surface coatings. There are special controls and requirements on the coating plants that you don't see in the ADAM regulations that we have as a result of being in non-attainment for years with respect to PM 2.5 and those on. So again, we are continuing to work with facilities in light of comments we received from the community to reduce emissions. That's our goal, is to first and foremost protect public health. But the way we do that though is, at least the area I'm involved in, do that is by regulating industrial sources and completing air monitoring on a continuous basis.
So I just want to add to that, because Dr. Masuca is, making some fine points, but ultimately, GASP has been working to make sure that these permits actually get challenged. So that's what we're doing, and we're helping you weigh in. You don't have to do it on your own. It's a very intimidating process. And the idea that a normal human being who is not steeped in this information, what is PM 2.5? Do any of you even know that? Of course not. Nobody knows what PM 2.5 is except for me and a few other people who work on air issues every day. So that's what we're doing, is trying to facilitate that process. And we do have information here tonight. If you want it before you go outside, before you leave, the Walter Cope permit comment period is over Monday. We have worked with the Jefferson County Department of Health very aggressively to try to make it as easy as possible for you. One of the things we'd like them to change actually is to allow emails. You know, you have to have it delivered into the office by 4:30, which is their close of business, on the day of the closing comments. We had the comment periods extended. We had the public hearings. We requested those. So, you know, we have pushed very hard to make sure that this became a public process for you. That's ABC Coke and Walter Coke. And those processes are going to be going on for quite some time, I bet you money. Yeah.
Everybody stand up and like to see email comments.
What now?
Everybody stand up and like to see email comments.
Email comments. Yay!
I hear you loud and clear, and I'll take that back to my superiors at the health department.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, everybody. That's great. So I'm going to turn it back over. We're going to have another question in the audience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who's next?
Right back here. Right back here.
Hey, I just wanted to say, I actually did a project with ML at UAB looking at UAB students and their level of awareness of pollution, and we found that over 50% didn't even know pollution occurred in Birmingham, and over 70% didn't know that pollution traveled. The good news is that when we gave them the hypothetical situation saying, okay, if you lived in a polluted area, they believed that, it was our responsibility to help them out, our responsibility to clean up. So I'm wondering, do you think that part of this problem stems from the fact that, in public schools, we don't talk about pollution at all? You can only learn about pollution if you take a specialized course. So I'm wondering, is there any, incentive in Birmingham to do reach out efforts in the education sector?
Corey might actually have something to say about that, because I know that the health department was attempting to do some sort of education about asthma, education about making sure that your vegetables are clean, making sure you wash your hands, and teaching children in those communities that are affected by pollution in their dirt, high lead levels, high arsenic levels in their dirt, teaching them how to live with it, basically. I think it would be an excellent idea to teach children and to teach families about pollution in their area. I will tell you, educators, politicians, regulators are only going to do as much as they feel that they have to do in order to get to the next day. If they don't feel like there are people out there who want change, they're not going to make change. They have no reason to. Corey has no reason to change the risk assessment, which I think Kirsten Bryan could speak about very much clearer than I could, but the whole risk assessment changed, making it 1 in a million instead of where it is now. I believe I understand